September 1945, Fort Bliss, Texas. A group of German men in ill-fitting American suits step off a military transport plane. They're not prisoners of war, they're not refugees, they're guests, VIP guests. Among them, Werner von Braun, former SS officer and technical director of Nazi Germany's V-2 rocket program. The V-2 killed thousands of civilians in London and Antwerp. Thousands more slave laborers died building them in underground factories. Von Braun knows this. The Americans know this. But no one is talking about it. Instead, von Braun is being escorted to a secure research facility, given a comfortable salary, provided housing, promised American citizenship. His mission? Build rockets for the United States. The same rockets that rained terror on Allied cities will now become America's path to the moon. This isn't a war crimes trial. This is a job offer. And von Braun isn't the only Nazi scientist getting this treatment. Over the next decade, more than 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians will be secretly brought to America. Many were members of the Nazi Party. Some were SS officers. A few conducted human experiments. Their crimes will be erased, their backgrounds sanitized, their pasts rewritten, all in the name of beating the Soviets. The operation has a code name, Paperclip, and it's one of the most morally compromising decisions the U.S. government ever made.
To understand why America made this deal, we need to understand what Nazi Germany had created. By 1945, Nazi Germany had lost the war, but in the final desperate years, they had developed weapons technology far ahead of the Allies. The V-2 rocket was the world's first ballistic missile. It traveled at 3,500 miles per hour. It could strike targets 200 miles away. There was no defense against it. You couldn't hear it coming. You couldn't shoot it down. Between September 1944 and March 1945, Germany launched over 3,000 V-2 rockets. They killed about 9,000 people, mostly civilians. But the V-2 wasn't just a terror weapon. It was the prototype for all modern rocketry. Every space rocket, every ICBM, every satellite launch system, they all descend from the V-2. Nazi Germany had also developed jet aircraft technology that was years ahead of Allied designs, advanced submarine technology, including hydrogen peroxide engines, nerve agents like sarin and tabun, acoustic and magnetic proximity fuses, early infrared night vision devices, early computer technology. When the war ended, both the United States and Soviet Union realized whoever captured Nazi scientists and their research would dominate the next war. The race was on. April 1945. As Allied forces pushed into Germany from the west and Soviets from the east, special intelligence teams followed behind. Their mission? Find the scientists, find the research, get them before the Soviets do. The operation was called Operation Overcast initially, later renamed Operation Paperclip. The name came from the literal paper clips used to attach new, falsified biographies to the scientists' files. The American teams focused particularly on Peenemünde, the secret Nazi rocket research facility on the Baltic coast. This is where Werner von Braun had developed the V-2. May 2, 1945. Von Braun and his team of engineers surrendered to American forces. He chose carefully. He surrendered to the Americans, not the Soviets. Von Braun understood. The Americans would treat him as a valuable asset. The Soviets would treat him as a war criminal. He was right. Within weeks, von Braun and his top engineers were on their way to the United States. Behind them, American troops loaded 14 tons of V-2 documents onto trucks. They disassembled 100 V-2 rockets and shipped them to the U.S. They also left something behind: the V-2 production facility at Middlework. Middlework was built inside a mountain using concentration camp slave labor. An estimated 20,000 prisoners died there, more than were killed by the V-2 rockets themselves. Workers were starved, beaten, worked to death. Von Braun visited Middlework regularly. He selected skilled prisoners for technical work. He saw the conditions. He knew. But in 1945, the U.S. government decided that didn't matter. What mattered was beating the Soviets. President Truman had actually issued a directive: no Nazi Party members, no war criminals, no one who had actively supported the Nazi regime. The military and intelligence agencies ignored it. They created new backgrounds for the scientists, erased SS memberships, minimized Nazi Party affiliations, buried evidence of war crimes. The paperclips held fake biographies in place, and the scientists came to America. Wernher von Braun is the most famous paperclip scientist, but he wasn't the worst. Let's meet some of the others. Hubertus Strughold, the father of space medicine. Strughold studied how humans could survive in space: altitude, temperature, pressure. His research was groundbreaking. It was also based on Nazi human experiments. Strughold was present at a 1942 conference where doctors discussed experiments conducted at Dachau concentration camp prisoners. Prisoners were subjected to extreme cold, low-pressure chambers, and other tortures disguised as research. Many died. After the war, Strughold came to America under paperclip. He became chief scientist at the Air Force School of Aviation Medicine. He helped design the spacesuits used by NASA astronauts. NASA later named an award after him, the Hubertus Strughold Award. When his Nazi past was revealed decades later, the award was quietly retired. Kurt Blohm, Deputy Reich Health Leader. Blohm conducted experiments with plague bacteria on concentration camp prisoners. He was tried at Nuremberg as part of the doctor's trial. He was acquitted, narrowly. 2 months later, the U.S. Army secretly hired him. His expertise? Biological warfare. He worked on classified projects for the U.S. Army Chemical Corps. Walter Schreiber, Nazi medical inspector. Schreiber supervised human experiments at concentration camps, including freezing experiments and epidemic jaundice studies. After the war, he was brought to Texas under paperclip to work on biological warfare projects. When his background was exposed by the media in 1952, the scandal was too big to ignore. He was quietly sent to Argentina. Arthur Rudolph, production director at Mittelwerk. Rudolph was directly responsible for slave labor conditions at the underground V-2 factory. He came to America under paperclip and became a key figure at NASA. He helped design the Saturn V rocket that took Americans to the moon. He received NASA's Distinguished Service Medal. In 1984, when investigators finally caught up with him, he fled back to Germany rather than face deportation proceedings. Kurt Debus, V-2 launch director. Debus was an SS officer and ardent Nazi who wore his SS uniform to work at Peenemünde. He came to America and became the first director of NASA's Kennedy Space Center. He presided over every Apollo moon launch. These men weren't minor figures. They weren't just swept up in the Nazi regime. They were active participants. They wore the uniforms. They attended the rallies. They benefited from slave labor and human experimentation. And America gave them new lives. But it wasn't just rocket scientists. The CIA recruited Nazi intelligence officers under a related program. Reinhard Gehlen, former Nazi general and Eastern Front intelligence chief. Gehlen had overseen brutal interrogations and war crimes on the Eastern Front.
After the war, the CIA hired him to run anti-Soviet intelligence operations. His network of former Nazi intelligence officers became the foundation of West German intelligence. The CIA knew about his background. They didn't care. His spy network was too valuable. The Soviets, by the way, were doing the exact same thing. They captured thousands of German scientists and forced them to work in the USSR. This wasn't about morality. This was about the Cold War. And in the Cold War, the enemy of your enemy was your asset, even if that asset had been your enemy 3 years earlier. By 1973, when Operation Paperclip officially ended, over 1,600 German scientists and their families had been brought to America. Some were guilty of nothing more than working for the Nazi government. But others had blood on their hands. And America had quietly washed it away.
For decades, Operation Paperclip was classified. The American public didn't know. When details finally emerged in the 1970s and 80s, the response was outrage. How could America, the nation that defeated fascism, that prosecuted war criminals at Nuremberg, secretly hire those same criminals? The government's defense was simple: necessity. The Soviet threat was existential. If we didn't take the Nazi scientists, the Soviets would. Better they work for us than against us. It was Cold War logic, brutal, pragmatic, morally bankrupt. But did it work? That depends on how you measure success. The successes. Wernher von Braun and his team were instrumental in America's space program. The Saturn V rocket they designed remains the most powerful rocket ever successfully flown. It took 12 Americans to the moon. Without Paperclip scientists, would America have won the space race? Possibly not as quickly, possibly not at all. Their contributions to missile technology gave America a strategic advantage over the Soviets. Medical research from Paperclip scientists contributed to aviation medicine, aerospace engineering, and space exploration. From a purely utilitarian perspective, Operation Paperclip achieved its goals. But at what cost? The failures. America compromised its moral authority. How could the U.S. prosecute war criminals at Nuremberg while secretly hiring others? It sent a message: war crimes are forgivable if you're useful. It undermined the principle that some actions are beyond redemption. The sanitized backgrounds created false histories. Nazi collaborators were rebranded as heroes. When the truth eventually emerged, it damaged trust in government. And here's the uncomfortable question: did bringing Nazi scientists to America help normalize their ideology? Many Paperclip scientists never renounced their Nazi beliefs. They just kept them quiet. Some maintained contact with Nazi networks. Some passed on their views to American colleagues and students. Did Operation Paperclip help fascist ideas survive and spread in new forms? There's no definitive answer, but it's a question worth asking. The individuals. For the scientists themselves, Paperclip was a miracle. They went from facing potential war crimes trials to comfortable lives in America. Von Braun became a celebrity. He appeared on TV. He consulted for Disney. He was portrayed as a visionary genius. The slave laborers who died building his rockets were forgotten. Some Paperclip scientists expressed regret in later life. Von Braun gave carefully worded statements acknowledging he should have done more to oppose Nazi atrocities, but he never fully accounted for his role at Mittelwerk. Others never expressed any remorse at all. Arthur Rudolph, when confronted with evidence of his war crimes in 1984, insisted he was just following orders. Where have we heard that before? The precedent. Operation Paperclip set a dangerous precedent. Useful expertise can erase moral crimes. This logic has been repeated many times since. The U.S. has allied with dictators, supported war criminals, and overlooked atrocities, all in the name of strategic advantage. From supporting right-wing death squads in Latin America to allying with authoritarian regimes in the Middle East, the paperclip logic persists. Morality is secondary to strategic advantage. Is this realpolitik, or is it moral bankruptcy? Different people will answer differently.
Today, Operation Paperclip remains controversial. In 2014, Annie Jacobson published a comprehensive book on Paperclip that brought renewed attention to the program. Documentaries and articles continue to investigate the program's moral implications. NASA has quietly removed honors for scientists whose Nazi pasts were too egregious to ignore. But the scientific achievements remain. Every time a rocket launches, every time we benefit from space technology, every time we use GPS or satellite communications, we're using technology built on the foundation that paperclip scientists laid. Does that taint the technology, or can we separate the achievement from the achiever? There's an argument that knowledge is neutral, that a rocket is just physics and engineering, regardless of who designed it. But there's a counter-argument. Nothing exists in a moral vacuum. The how and why of creation matter. The Saturn V didn't just appear from pure science. It came from a direct line connecting concentration camp slave labor to the moon landing. Can we celebrate one without acknowledging the other? Modern Germany has grappled with this question more honestly than America. Germany has confronted its Nazi past directly. They teach it in schools. They maintain memorials. They acknowledge the crimes. America has been more selective. We celebrate the space program. We lionize the moon landing. We're less comfortable discussing the Nazi scientists who made it possible. Perhaps that's changing. In recent years, there's been more honest discussion about Operation Paperclip, more acknowledgement that moral compromises were made, more recognition that we can appreciate the achievements while condemning the means. But here's the difficult truth. If we could go back to 1945, would we do it differently? If you're President Truman and you believe the Soviet Union is an existential threat, and you know the Soviets are recruiting Nazi scientists, do you let them have a strategic advantage, or do you compromise your principles to maintain parity? It's easy to judge from 80 years later. It was harder in the moment. That doesn't make it right, but it makes it understandable. And perhaps that's the real lesson of Operation Paperclip. Not that America made a deal with the devil, but that in desperate times, even democracies are tempted to compromise their values for perceived security. The question is, when you make that compromise, can you ever get your values back? July 20th, 1969. Neil Armstrong steps onto the lunar surface. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. It's one of humanity's greatest achievements, a triumph of science, engineering, and human courage. And it was made possible, in part, by Wernher von Braun, former SS officer, director of a program that killed thousands of slave laborers, and NASA's chief architect of the Saturn V rocket. How do we hold both those truths simultaneously? History isn't simple. It's not a morality play with clear heroes and villains. It's messy, complicated, full of moral compromises and uncomfortable truths. Operation Paperclip is one of those uncomfortable truths. America defeated the Nazis, then hired them. We prosecuted war criminals at Nuremberg, then gave others new identities and comfortable jobs.
We built a space program on technology developed through slave labor and human suffering. Does the moon landing justify Operation Paperclip? No. Does Operation Paperclip diminish the moon landing? That's harder to answer. What's clear is this: we can't pretend it didn't happen. We can't airbrush the Nazis out of NASA's history. We can't celebrate von Braun as a visionary while ignoring the workers who died building his rockets. Truth requires acknowledging complexity. The same man who helped America reach the moon oversaw a factory where 20,000 people died. Both things are true. And perhaps that's the real lesson of Operation Paperclip. Not that America made a deal with the devil, but that the devil's gifts come with a price. And that price is paid in moral compromises we're still reckoning with today. Every rocket launch carries that legacy. Every satellite, every space mission, every advancement in aerospace technology, built on the brilliance of scientists who served evil. And the question remains, was it worth it? History suggests America thought so, but history also suggests we're still not comfortable admitting it. Operation Paperclip was supposed to be temporary, a Cold War necessity that would end when the threat ended. But the logic never ended. Strategic advantage still trumps moral consistency. Useful allies still get a pass on their crimes. The deal with the devil, it turns out, isn't a one-time transaction. It's a precedent, and we're still living with it. So the next time you marvel at a rocket launch, remember, someone paid for that technology. And it wasn't just with dollars and research grants. It was paid for with lives, with compromised principles, with convenient amnesia about inconvenient truths. That's America's deal with the devil. And like all deals with the devil, the full price is never clear until long after the contract is signed.